Hello friends, in this lecture we are going to discuss about the coral reefs. Now, what are the things we are going to discuss in this lecture are, first of all, we will discuss what are coral reefs. Second, conditions suitable for the growth of coral reefs. And then we will discuss the different types of coral reefs. And after discussing the type of coral reefs, we will discuss the theories, various theories which are being given by the different scholars to explain how different types of coral reefs have evolved over a period of time. And then we will discuss about coral bleaching, and then instances of the coral bleaching, that is different time in the past, in different period, the different incidents of the coral bleaching has happened in which parts of the world. These are the things we are going to discuss, and at the last leg of this lecture we will discuss about the regions, what are the regions for the coral bleaching. So first of all, what are coral reefs? What are coral reefs? Coral reefs are marine landforms. These are marine landforms which forms due to accumulation of skeletal remains of a microorganism which is known as coral polyps. So corals are animals. Many times we get confused. We assume that these corals are rocks or these are plant, but it is not so. Corals are animals, and they are made up of tiny animals, and these tiny animals are called polyps. And when these tiny animals, that is polyps, accumulate together, join together, they are known as coral polyps. They are known as coral polyps. And it is most diverse ecosystem of the planet Earth, as it covers less than 1% of the sea floor, but these are home to more than 25%, not less but 25% of the marine creature. So due to its diversity, it is often considered as indicator of health of marine environment. It means that if the condition of the coral reefs are healthy, then we can say that the marine environment is healthy. And due to this tremendous biodiversity, it is also called as rainforest. Rainforest of marine environment is called. And these corals are heterotrophs. Heterotrophs means they cannot prepare their food on their own. They cannot prepare their food on their own. So it arises a question that how they get their food requirements fulfilled. उनका food requirement कैसे पूरा होता है? So they used to live in symbiotic relationship with an algae known as zooxanthellae, and this zooxanthellae is an autotrophs. It means it make their food on their own through the process of photosynthesis. And these are heterotrophs, not autotrophs. Means they are dependent on autotrophs for their food requirement. We all are all human beings are heterotrophs, as we cannot create our food on their own. We are dependent on plants, animals, plants in form of vegetables, cereals. Animals we used to prefer egg curry or chicken curry, mutton, etc. In a similar fashion, these corals are dependent on zooxanthellae for their food requirement, as these zooxanthellae produce their own food through the process of photosynthesis. And these corals are neither a swimmer like nectons, that is, like fishes. These are not a swimmer nor a floater, neither swimmer like fish and nor a floater like planktons. Means they do not float on the ocean surfaces like planktons, and neither they swim like fish. They are different from them. Now the question arises. Now the question arises how they are in symbiotic relationship with the algae. How they are in symbiotic relationship. So first of all, we will try to understand what is symbiotic relationship. Symbiotic relationship is any relationship. Symbiotic relationship is any relationship in which both the parties both the parties are benefited from their relationship. We can easily understand. We have already discussed how the coral is dependent on zooxanthellae, means how coral is get benefited from the algae zooxanthellae, as these corals get their food requirement fulfilled with the help of zooxanthellae. Then how zooxanthellae get benefited from the coral reefs? When it comes to the zooxanthellae, it is this corals which provide shelter, to this zooxanthellae. In this way, they are in symbiotic relationship. It means corals provide shelter to the zooxanthellae and zooxanthellae provides food to the corals. And it is these algae which also have bright pigment and range of colors which result into colorful coral reefs. The colorful coral reefs, this is the image of coral reefs. They are of different colors. Here they are of green color, here some reddish or maroon color, here brown color. These different colors which we are seeing are due to the algae. In fact, these corals are transparent. These corals are transparent. It is these algae which provide different colors to the coral reefs, which are very soothing when we see. And it is these colors which attracts thousands of tourists to visit those places which have these coral reefs, and it provide a opportunity for those areas to develop tourism sector and earn money from that sector. Apart from this, these corals also provide a window to the past. How how it provides window to the past. As coral grow their limestone, as the coral grow, their limestone forms a layer similar to the tree rings. As these are limestone, they form layers similar to tree rings, which we all know that it is used for determining the age, determining the past environment, past climate. In the similar fashion, this composition and thickness of the limestone, the different layers which limestone forms, similar to the rings, that vary in composition and thickness based on the oceanic condition of the time they form. So, scientists can study these layers to reveal what the Earth's climate may have been in the past. What the Earth climate may have been in the past. So we can say that these coral reefs also provide a window to the past climatic condition, inside the ocean, as the thickness of the limestone layers vary according to the climatic condition. And these coral reefs are extremely delicate and fragile ecosystem. Means they cannot develop in each and every part of the world. They require a specific condition, a specific temperature, a specific salinity, etc. for their growth and survival. So now the question arises, what are the conditions which are required for the growth of coral reefs? These coral reefs survive in warm water. This itself says that they are mainly limited to the tropical waters. They are mainly limited to the tropical waters, which range from 25 degree tropical waters, and the temperature range is 25 to 30 degrees Celsius. It may vary. In some books you will see this range is given 22 to 25 or 23 to 27 degree, but for a safer side we can consider this 25 degree Celsius to 30 degrees Celsius is the temperature range which is required for the survival of the coral reefs. So it is limited to the tropical water, but in cold upwelling zone, means the regions which are in cold upwelling zones does not have coral reefs. For example, when we see Africa, this is cold upwelling zones. Here Venezuela current, which is cold current, is found in this belt. So the coral reef in this belt is absent. Although this belt come under the tropical region, as the equator passes from here, this is 23 degree north, here 23 degree south, Tropic of Capricorn and Cancer. In spite of this, in the eastern in the in the eastern waters of Atlantic Ocean, coral reefs are absent. So it survive in warm water, temperature range 25 to 30 degrees Celsius, and limited to the tropical waters. But in cold upwelling zones, means in cold upwelling zones, it is not found. It cannot survive. The second condition which is required, it cannot survive outside the surface water for a long time. So they found just below the high tide level. They found just below the high tide level. As they can survive for few hours in a day, so mainly it is found below the water surface, below the water surface. And the third condition which is required for the growth of coral reefs is salinity. Salinity should not be less than 33 parts per thousand. 33 parts per thousand. It should not be less than 33 parts per thousand. Hence, the coral cannot grow along the mouth of rivers. Why? Because river brought in fresh water to the ocean, and this reduces the salinity. So those regions in the ocean, or those pockets in the ocean where large large river systems get fall into the ocean, those regions does not have coral reefs, as due to the addition of fresh water, it reduces the salinity. It reduces salinity less than 33 parts per thousand, so it became unsuitable for the corals to grow in that region. Apart from this, it requires continuous replacement of nutrients. And it is done by waves and moving waters. And it is this reason it is mainly grow away from the coastal parts. It grows away from the coastal part. Even if grow along the coast, those part which are away from the coast grow at a rapid pace, and it impacted by the muddy waters. Why muddy water? Because these muddy waters can clog, block the pores of corals, which in turn result into death of coral reefs. Death of coral reefs. It is also one of the reason that the corals, when it grows along the coast, their growth away from the coast are at rapid pace, then towards the coast, and they do not survive in deep water, that is not beyond 200 to 250 feet, that is 60 to 70 meter. Why it is so? As we have earlier discussed, these corals get their food requirement fulfilled from zooxanthellae, and these zooxanthellae produce their food through the process of photosynthesis, through the process called photosynthesis. And for photosynthesis, sunlight is most crucial. In the absence of sunlight, the whole process of photosynthesis cannot take place. Therefore, it cannot survive beyond the photic zone, that is 200 to 250 feet or 60 to 70 meters. Now we will discuss Types of coral reefs. There are three types of coral reefs. There are three types. First is fringing coral reefs. This first one. Second one, barrier reef. And third is atoll. These are the three types of coral reefs. Now we will discuss all these three types of coral reefs one by one. So our first type is fringing reef. Fringing reefs. These reefs are along the margin of the continents or islands in shallow water of the continental shelf. These are along the margin of continent and islands in the shallow water of continental shelf, as it is evident from the given diagram. This is land and this is our fringing reef. This is sea, this is land, this is fringing reef. It is along the margin of continent. This can be continent or as well as island. And it may or may not include the lagoons. Now, what is lagoons? These are those water bodies enclosed. These are saline water bodies. Saline water bodies enclosed between land mass, that is enclosed between continent or island and the coral reefs. For example, in this diagram, if the height of the coral reefs increases to this is sea level, and saline seawater also accumulate over, this will be the lagoon. So this fringing reef may or may not enclose lagoons. This is the cross sectional view. This is cross sectional view of fringing reef. When we see the fringing reef from the top, how it looks like? It will look like something like this. This is continent or island. And these two are coral reefs, which is fringing reefs. These two. This is top view. Now, the second type. Second type is barrier reef. This is barrier reef. It is located further oceanwards, as we can see that. It is located further oceanwards. And its thickness, mainly it has been observed that its thickness is beyond the footing zone. So the question arises in your mind, erstwhile I have said the coral reefs cannot grow beyond the footing zone. Then how comes this barrier reef develop beyond the footing zone? Wait, we will discuss how it develops beyond the footing zone in the different various theories which are being given by the various scholars. to explain the coral reefs, different types of coral reefs. So wait for few more minutes, we will get to know how it develops beyond the photic zone. And it is the largest and the most extensive coral reef system. And one of the example is Great Barrier Reef, which is located off Queensland coast of Australia. And any discussion on the coral reef is incomplete without mentioning the Great Barrier Reef of Australia. Here in this diagram given over there, it is again a cross-sectional view of the coral reefs. Land over here, this is lagoon, this water, this is barrier reef, and this is sea. How it look like when we want to see a top view, how it looks like from the top, will look like something like this. If this is a landmass, it may be a continent or an island. The coral, sorry. In this is a landmass, maybe a continent or island. These are the coral, barrier coral reefs. This is again barrier coral reefs. This is top view of the barrier coral reefs. Now we will discuss the third and the last type of coral reefs, which is atolls. These atolls are near circular in formation. Near circular coral formation is known as atolls, and it formed out in open ocean. In the last two types of coral reefs, that is fringing reef and barrier reef, we observed that these two type of reefs are mainly formed along the coast, along the continent, or at a few distance from the continent or landmass when it comes to the barrier reef. But when it comes to the atolls, they formed out in the ocean, and it enclosed a shallow lagoon, and may or may not have islands. And it is the most mysterious one. Means it is difficult to explain its evolution, how it evolved. How this type of coral reef evolved is very difficult to explain. That's why it is often said that it is a mysterious one. And example, coral reefs are found in Maldives, Lakshadweep, Sicily. The diagram over given here is again a cross-sectional view. These are reefs. This is island below the sea level. This lagoon, small lagoon, forms and it mainly forms along guyot or volcanic mountains, etc. And the minor atolls, small atolls, are called as patch reefs. It may be asked in prelims. And if very, very small and narrow, then it is called pinnacle. So these atolls When they are minor, means smaller in area, they are called as patch reefs. And if these patch reefs are very narrow and thin, then this is known as pinnacle. Now we have seen the cross-sectional view, how it will look like when we see it from the top. So its top view look like this, something like this. If this is island, if any island is found, this belt, these are corals, and this gap are often known as board channels. This is top view of atolls. Now, after discussing the different types of the coral reefs, that is fringing reef, barrier reef, and atolls, we will discuss the various theories being given by the various scholars to explain how these different types of the coral reefs have evolved over a period of time. Now, since these coral reefs require a platform to grow and they cannot survive beyond the photic zone, we have discussed in the beginning part of the lecture. So, shallow continental shelf and margins of the continent and island are convenient location for the growth of the coral reefs, because this comes under the photic zone, as well as it provides the required platform for the corals to grow. Hence, these fringing reefs are easiest to explain. Now, the challenge is understanding the barrier reef and atolls, as these two types of reef are found at a distance. When it comes to the barrier reef, it found at a distance from the margins of the continent, continental shelf. And when it comes to the atolls, it is found in open ocean. So it is most difficult to explain. So what in the theories being given by the different scholars, what they try to explain, they attempt to explain the origin of the platform, how the different platforms have came into existence, which in turn provide a suitable location to the corals to grow and form different types of the coral reefs. And these theories of the coral reefs are mainly divided into two groups of theories. One is subsidence theory, which is being given by the Darwin, and the second is standstill theory, which includes the theories given by the scholars like Murray theory, Agassiz theory, Gardiner theory, and Dallas theory. Dallas theory is also known as glacial control theory. We will discuss all these theories one by one. First of all, Darwin theory. Darwin in his theory said that these three types of coral reefs, are actually three stages in accumulation of corals. He said these three types: fringing reef, barrier reef, and atolls. These are not the three types but three stages of accumulation of the corals, which we generally see as different three types of the coral reefs. And he said it happens due to the gradual subsidence of the landmass or sinking of the landmass, and to cope up with the height, to cope up with the subsidence, the landmass subside, and these coral reefs to remain in the photic zone, they used to grow, and in the process they passes through these three stages. These three stages. What he said, he said that first of all fringing reef get forms, and due to the subsidence, these earlier existing reefs goes beyond the photic zone. Some part of it goes beyond the photic zone, and once this part goes beyond the photic zone, these they became dead, and these dead coral reefs act as a platform for the growth of new coral reefs. New coral reefs. And as these corals require continuous replacement of the nutrients, and they grow due to which they grow faster towards the oceanwards, which is evident from the second diagram. Here it is at the same level in the first diagram. In the second diagram, the growth away from the land is at a higher pace, and this in turn led to the formation of barrier reef, and there is a lagoon in between the land and open sea, or coral barrier reef. And this process continues even in the third stage, and when the whole land gets subside below the water, the coral gets formed on the whole land mass, as evident in the third diagram. Whatever the Darwin said in his theory is a fair possibility, especially in those areas which are tectonically unstable areas, because the gradual subsidence, sinking of land mass is occur in tectonically unstable areas, means active belt, in those areas which are active, tectonically active. And it is also evident when we study the various barriers, reefs, and atolls. We have found that those regions are tectonically unstable areas, as they have more irregular embayed coastline. This condition, this prevailing condition of irregular and embayed coastline, suggests there is a possibility of subsidence. And it was Davis and Dana who supported the Darwin's subsidence theory. And when we, in the process of examination, when we drill through the barrier reef, or atolls, studying the rocks at unconfirmable contact, it shows that evidences of aerial and subaerial erosion. Now the question arises, what is unconfirmable contact? The contact between the land, means the upper part of the land and the lower part of the reefs, coral reefs. This red line denotes the confirmable contact. And when the studies are done in this confirmable contact, it shows the evidences of aerial and subaerial. So it is possible only when there must have been time when this land are near to the water surface. Only then these evidences of the aerial and subaerial erosion can be found. So it is a fair possibility. One cannot deny it. But when we evaluate Darwin's subsidence theory, we found that there are examples where atolls and barrier reefs are found in the areas which do not have geological evidence of such subsidence. And if subsidence is a valid process, it is difficult to have it is difficult to have all the three types of the coral reefs at the same time in the same region. But along the Fiji Island, along the Funafuti atolls, all the three types of the coral reefs coexist. This questions the validity of the subsidence theory being given by the Darwin, which tries to explain the three types of the coral reefs and how they came into existence. Although along with Davis, Dana has supported the Darwin subsidence theory. But Dana also reasoned that absence of cliffing is not a confirmatory evidence, as it may be due to the presence of the barrier reef. If this is island or continent and this is barrier reef, it is the presence of barrier reef which prohibit the erosion, which restricts the waves, oceanic waves, from coming to this belt and from coming to this region, and in turn restrict the process of erosion and absence of cliffing. So Dana also precautioned, although he supported, but he said that it is not a confirmatory. Due to these questions which are being unanswered in the Darwin's subsidence theory, others' theory came into prominence to explain the how different types of the coral reefs came into existence. And these theory are classified as stand still theory. Why it is said that it is a stand still theory? Because these theories does not consider, anticipate the phenomena of subsidence, gradual subsidence and sinking of the landmass. So they are known as standstill theory. So it was unlike the Darwin's, whose theory is based on gradual subsidence theory. In this, they assume the assumption is based on that land are stable and stand still. No, the Murray theory. Among the standstill theories, Murray theory, Murray in his theory said size and shape of the coral reefs depend upon the type and the shape of platform on which the coral colonized. He said that the different types of the coral reef depend upon the type and shape of the platform on which these coral colonize. So he asserted a suitable platform must exist at a right depth. Therefore, barrier reef, when it comes to barrier reef, it accumulates on underwater barrier ridge. If this is a barrier ridge, this is barrier ridge, Then if the corals colonize on this barrier ridge, they are known as barrier reef. Similarly, atolls develop on seamount circular guyots. Seamounts circular guyots. And this is open sea. If this is corals, this is corals, this is open sea. Atolls. So according to Murray, it is suitable platform at a right depth. What he said in his theory, if there is any platform, which is above the right depth, then it will first get eroded to suitable depth, and if that platform lie below the right depth, then accumulation of pelagic deposit will help that platform to reach the right depth, and once it reach the right depth, it will help in colonization of coral reefs. And the shape of that platform will determine the different types of the coral reefs. As for barrier reefs, it is barrier ridge. For atolls, seamount or circular guyots. But Murray's theory cannot explain the thickness of the coral accumulation beyond the photic zone. So this question of presence of coral reefs beyond photic zone remains unanswered. Agassiz theory. Agassiz's theory was not a new theory altogether. He agreed with the Murray, as when he studies the coral accumulation of the Lakshadweep island, he found evidences where the coral have been accumulated over wave cut platform. And this wave cut platform is a result of erosion by sea waves. And once these platforms reach a suitable height, a suitable platform right at a right depth, it results into the colonization of that platform by the corals and led to the formation of coral reefs. So he did not give a different theory altogether. He studied the coral accumulation of the Lakshadweep island and agreed with the Murray. And why he said so, because he found the evidences where the corals have been accumulated over wave cut platform. It's something like this. If this is a continent, This is C. This area is wave cut platform. The next theory was Gardiner theory. Gardiner discovered that the thickness of the coral accumulation are not necessarily the same shallow water corals. In his theory, he tried to explain the presence of the coral reefs beyond the photic zone. He said that it is not the same coral reefs, it is not the same coral accumulation at which is found beyond the photic zone. Beyond the photic zone. So what he want to say that कि he discovered different types of the coral reefs. उन्होंने ये कहा कि जो कोरल एक्युमुलेशन आपके फोटिक जोन में पाए जा रहे हैं, मीन्स अपर पार्ट में पाए जा रहे हैं, और जो कोरल एक्युमुलेशन बियॉन्ड फोटिक जोन पाए जा रहे हैं इन द लोअर पार्ट्स, these are not same coral accumulation. So he discovered different types of the coral reefs. Discovered different types of the coral reef, and he classified into 3 types of the corals. What are these? Deep sea corals, which is found beyond the photic zone and can survive at a depth of 150 fathom. 150 fathoms. And then the second type is intermediate depth corals, and it can survive at a depth of 80 to 100 fathoms. And the shallow water, which is within 30 to 40 fathoms. Hence, he said that as different types of the corals are found at different depth, subsidence is not unnecessary to explain the thickness of the coral reefs. By giving these different types of corals which are found at different depth, he dismissed the claim of Darwin subsidence of landmass. And now the fourth and the most important among the standstill theory is given by Daly's glacial theory. Daly's glacial theory. He studied the corals of Hawaii Island, and he was amazed by the fact that Hawaiian Island do not have as much as corals या coral accumulation as is expected of their location and their conducive condition. As we know that coral reefs are very fragile ecosystem. They are limited to a specific belt, a specific region of the world, and the location of the Hawaiian Island is one of the most suitable location, one of the most conducive condition. They have one of the most conducive condition for the growth and development of the coral reefs. But Daly in his study found that the coral of the Hawaiian Island are not as much as he has expected, as it is expected from the conditions which they provide by the nature of its location. And he was able to relate the impact of the ice age on the growth of the coral accumulation, from which he developed the glacial control theory of coral reefs, by which he relate the impact of ice age on the growth of coral accumulation. What he said in his theory, according to him, with the coming of ice age, most of the coral died. Most with the coming of the ice age, most of the coral died. As we know that they can grow between 25 degrees Celsius to 30 degrees Celsius. It may vary in some books, in some textbook, but generally speaking, it varies between 25 degrees Celsius to 30 degrees Celsius. And with the coming of ices, the temperature is necessarily going below the 25 degrees Celsius, and due to which the corals died. And this, with the coming of the ices, it also resulted in the fall of sea level and coral getting exposed. And these exposed landforms must have been eroded down to a new lowered sea level. Now, with the coming of warmer time, these eroded surfaces became suitable platform for the growth of corals. With the coming of the warmer time, these eroded surfaces became suitable platform for the coral growth. Although he said that with the coming of the ices, most of the coral died. He said most of the coral died, not all. So some corals must have survived, which regenerated itself with the coming of the warmer time. And with the coming of the warmer time, the sea level is going to increase at a rapid pace. So these corals will also colonize at a rapid pace in order to remain in the photic zone. Remain in the photic zone. So he said that according to him, it is not the subsidence or the sinking, gradual subsidence or gradual sinking of the land mass which explain the presence of the coral accumulation beyond photic zone, but it is with the coming of the warmer time, the increase in seawater level explains the presence of coral accumulation, coral reefs beyond photic zone. And when it comes to the different types of the coral reefs, he says similar to the moraines. It is the shape of the platform which decides the type. Shape of the platform decides the type of the corals. For example, barrier reef, get accumulated along on barrier reef, barrier reefs. And when it comes to the atolls, it accumulated on seamounts, geodes, volcanic mount, etc. So after discussing all the three types, all the different theories of the coral reefs, we can say that in spite of all those questions being unanswered, in Darwin's subsidence theory, we cannot outrightly deny the possibility of the Darwin's. At the same time, Daly's glacier theory also cannot be denied. So these set of theories, Darwin's, Daly's, help us in understanding how the different types of the coral reefs came into existence. Now the comes the most important topics, that is coral bleaching. And I think all of us are aware of this coral bleaching because it is one of the most important environmental concern. As in the beginning of the lecture itself, we have discussed how important the corals are for the marine health, as it is an indicator of the health of the marine environment, as it constitutes 1% of the ocean surface and provides a space have 25% of marine species, and due to its diversity it is often referred as rainforest of the ocean water. Rainforest of the ocean water. So how the coral bleaching, the whole process of the coral bleaching takes place? If zooxanthellae algae die or get expelled or are unable to attach themselves to the coral surfaces, the algae die. And once the algae die, it means the death of the corals. That is, zooxanthellae algae die or get expelled मतलब वो जो अटैच रहता है वो अटैच नहीं कर पाता अपने आप को, शेल्टर नहीं प्रोवाइड करता है. जब कोरल्स आर अनेबल टू प्रोवाइड शेल्टर्स टू द algae, they get expelled and are unable to attach themselves to the coral surfaces, which in turn led to the death of algae, which means death of corals, which result in whitening of coral reefs. Is called as coral bleaching. As in the beginning of our lecture, we have said that corals are a kind of calcareous rock. And these are chiefly made up of skeletons of minute sea organisms called polyps, and they are formed due to accumulation and compaction of a skeleton of these lime secreting organisms, and once they are dead they become white, which is evident when the coral reefs are healthy. It look like something like this. When it started dying, it look like this, white, and once it is dead it looks like this. Here it is dead, here the coral bleaching started, and here healthy corals. Why? Because once the zooxanthellae algae gets died, these corals are unable to meet their food requirement, and once in the absence of food no can survive, not even us are able to survive. So this led to the coral bleaching. Now, instances of the coral bleaching. Instances of the coral bleaching. In 1972, bleaching was due to the ocean water warming, and this impacted the Mediterranean Sea and Red Sea corals. 1972, it was due to the ocean water warming, and get impacted. Which regions of the world get impacted in 1972? It was Mediterranean Sea coral reefs and Red Sea coral reefs. Corals are get impacted. It was due to the ocean water warming. As as corals cannot survive beyond 25 degree to 30 degree, neither less than 25 degrees Celsius nor more than 30 degrees Celsius. So in 1972, in 1998 bleaching followed by 2002 bleaching, it was related to sunspot cycle. It was related to sunspot cycle. This is again due to the water warming, ocean water warming. But this time, the main reason behind the water warming was sunspot cycle. And in 2013, it is also again related to sunspot activity. And during the 1998 bleaching, which was later followed by 2002 bleaching, it is found that almost 50% of the corals across the world, not less, but 50% of the corals across the world were impacted, and about 80% were severely bleached. 50% were impacted, and 80% of this 50%, 80% gets severely bleached. In the Great Barrier itself, while in the Indian Ocean across the Lakshadweep, Maldives, Sicily, more than 90% bleached. Means in Barrier Reef of Australia, 50% get impacted, and of this 50%, 80% get severely bleached. This is the case of Barrier Reef of Australia. And when it comes to the Indian Ocean, the coral reefs of Lakshadweep, Maldives, Seychelles, etc., more than 90% gets bleached. This was the impact. Now, once we have read what is coral bleaching and different instances, different time period during which the coral bleaching has happened, now the question arises in our mind, what is the reasons behind the coral bleaching? And all the regions of coral bleaching are related to the marine environment, disruption of marine environment. All the regions are related to disruption of marine environment. Among them, first is global warming and increasing of ocean sea surface temperature. Global warming and increasing of sea surface temperature. As the corals have very delicate and narrow range of temperature in which they can survive, that is around 25 degree to 30 degree Celsius, or sometime we can say that 27 degree Celsius to or 30, but generally speaking 25 degree Celsius to 30 degree Celsius. If the temperature is not in between this range, that is 25 degrees Celsius to 30 degrees Celsius, it will result in bleaching. In recent year, the temperature of the enclosed sea has increased, such as North Indian Ocean, Caribbean Sea, Red Sea, Mediterranean Sea, that have reported higher coral bleaching due to this phenomena of global warming and increasing sea surface temperature. The second reason is ocean acidification. What is ocean acidification? How ocean acidification happens? It happens due to enhanced level of CO2 in the atmosphere. And this enhanced level of CO2 in the atmosphere can be due to the emission that can force the CO2 absorption in the ocean. That can force the CO2, carbon dioxide absorption in the ocean, and it happens in the process of carbon sequestration of the ocean, and this make the ocean water acidic. And this, once the ocean water became acidic, it can dissolve and destroy the coral reefs. As these coral reefs are a kind of corals are a kind of calcareous rock. Calcareous rocks, which are chiefly made up of skeletons of the minute sea organisms called polyps. Now, the third reason is change in ocean water chemistry, that is due to eutrophication, ballast water pollution, contamination from industrial effluents. Now, when it comes to the eutrophication is a process of nutrient enrichment of water, and it can happen mainly because of nitrates and phosphates added to the water. And these nitrates and phosphates can be added to the water from the sewage water discharge or accumulation of agriculture fertilizers to the water. And this enrichment result into the proliferation, means increase in number of marine life forms beyond the sustainable level, which naturally dissolve oxygen level of water can support. But once the number of marine life forms get increased beyond the sustainable level, the BOD, biological oxygen demand, gets increases beyond sustainable level, which can compromise the life and health of the marine life form. This is about eutrophication, increase in biological oxygen demand. The contamination from the industrial effluents or discharge. The compounds like cadmium, arsenic, mercury, which are toxic. Cadmium, arsenic, mercury, these are toxic and can impact corals. Now, the blast water pollution. Discharge of the ballast water can pollute and is more common along the sea lanes of communication. This is more common along the sea lanes of communication. And incidence of bleaching in Andaman and Nicobar, Indonesia, Lakshadweep are related to the ballast water pollution. Now, the fourth reason is pathogens and infections. Impact of xenobiotics. Xeno means impact of foreign. That is rise in ocean water temperature, also related to the bacterial outgrowth or viral infection or algal bloom. For example, in 1972 and 1998, bleaching of Mediterranean corals are related to the bacterial contamination. 1972 which is followed by 1998 coral bleaching. It was related to the bacterial contamination. And the third is due to the disruptive fishing methods, where nets can drag and break the coral reefs, in particular belt, especially in scenic dredging. Method. And extreme climate events like cyclone can also impact the coral reefs or destroy the coral reefs, and it is mainly the result of this extreme climate event is mainly the result of climate change. So these are the different dimensions of the coral reefs which we have discussed in this lecture. I hope it will help you to clear the different doubts and help you in understanding coral reefs in a much more better way. Thank you. This is Pankaj Kumar, now signing off.